Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Global Health Uncensored. I'm your host, Dr. Banda Khalifa. Today's guest is one of the most compelling figures in global health innovation. He's a founder and CEO of Syndicate Bio, a genomics company transforming how Africa is represented in biomedical research. He was recently named to Time's list of the 100 most influential people in health. He has spent the last decade challenging the scientific and structural exclusion by working to put African populations at the center of the next era of medicine and health. So in this episode, we discuss his professional path, his vision for inclusive precision medicine, and the hard truths about data sovereignty and what it takes to build a science-led enterprise out of Africa that commands global respect. We're truly honored to welcome Dr. Abasi to the Global Health Uncensored podcast. Let's get started. Dr. Abasi, congratulations on your inclusion in Time's 100 most influential people in health. I believe it shows the urgency and the relevance of your work in reshaping global science from the African continent. It's a privilege to have you here with us today.
Thank you so much, Banda. It's my honor to be here today. Thank you.
Great. So I know like you've probably won several awards throughout your career. But when you first saw your name on that list, what was your immediate reaction to seeing your name among the world elite?
Wow. If I'm going to be honest with you, which I always try to be, I wasn't expecting it. I was surprised. And I think anybody who kind of knows my story might understand why I was surprised. For the past, couple of years, I felt like I was in the wilderness. And of course, I've been told and I know that there are lots of people who are still watching my work and who are still very much interested. But I think the time list was just another way to remind me that even in what will be my wilderness, that so long because I've been consistent, that people also see that. I think it meant the most to me of all the other awards I have received.
Awesome. So I want us to kind of go back to the beginning. I always love those stories, as African you know, professionals. So, what was your early life like? Where did you grow up, and in what ways did your early experience influence your scientific curiosity and long-term vision?
Yeah, I was born in Nigeria to professor parents. So both my dad and my mom were professors. Studied abroad, were at the pinnacle of their respective careers. Both of them were scientists. I was the third child. I am the third child out of four children. And I don't know, I guess, my parents figured I was the one to go into sciences. I mean, I was usually the top of my class in, primary school, etc. So by the time I got into secondary, they're like, no, you have to study sciences. Um, and the truth is, if you left me to decide, I probably would have done something else. So
Hmm.
for university, I wanted to study French. Can you imagine?
Interesting.
Or economics. But my dad was a geneticist. He focused more on plant genetics. And I spent a lot of time in his shadow when I was a kid. I used to go to his office. I enjoyed being in his office with I'll take my classmates, my friends to his office as kids. And so, I think unbeknownst to me, there was something that was laid in me to do sciences. And then I got into genetics by accident. I think it was the first week or so of university. And I'd gotten into this program. It was a new program, genetics and biotechnology, but it wasn't the course I wanted to do. I wanted to do medicine and surgery in another university, as most
Mm.
of us all want to do.
Yeah.
But they arranged an orientation course to tell us about genetics. And I remember, in that first class, I just saw the potential of what genetics could do. And what really drew me to it was the fact that, at the time, and this was early 2000s, right? So this was
Hmm.
like 2001. At the time, it was believed that genetics was going to help solve things like Huntington's disease,
Hmm.
genetic
Yeah.
illness. And I wanted to be somebody who would help find drugs to solve this kind of diseases. Little did I know that genetics was going to underpin every other disease that there is, right, in today's
Hmm.
world.
Yeah.
And so that's what kind of got me into genetics. And so once I saw that, I decided I wasn't going to switch into anything, and I just wanted to continue as a geneticist. So that was when I stumbled upon it, but then I fell in love with it.
Awesome, awesome. I mean, that's an inspiring story. As you said, most students in Africa, once our parents, see that we are good in school, automatically, you're going straight to science, and you have no room to negotiate. So that's quite interesting. Yeah, so I know like on this platform we have graduate students, we have early career professionals, and we also have those who are, contemplating the next stage of their career. And I believe you sharing something about your academic path will be helpful for people who have interest in similar paths. So could you walk us through the early phases of your academic life? Where do you have your bachelor's, your experience applying to graduate school, and your doctoral training in general, and how you ended up in biotechnology?
Okay. So I got my bachelor's in Nigeria, University of Calabar. We were one of the first sets to study genetics and biotechnology as an undergraduate program because it was a new program, and I think at the time I got it, there were only two genetics programs in undergrad in all of Nigeria. And so I did my bachelor's in Nigeria. As with most people in Nigeria, you have to serve your country for 1 year, something we
Mm-hmm.
call national youth
National,
service.
yeah. In Ghana, we
So,
call it national
so I,
service.
oh, you do national service. Okay,
Yeah.
great. So I did my national service, and 2 weeks or so after my national service, I was in the UK for my master's in human molecular genetics. So I
Mm,
did my master's at Imperial College London, and then when I finished, about 6 months after, I started my PhD in cancer biology at the University of London, at Barts and the London School of Medicine and Dentistry, in the Barts Cancer Institute.
okay.
After my master's, I was contemplating whether I should do my PhD in genetics as well. But then I thought to myself that it would be good to get another type of experience. So I wanted cell biology type experience, and that was what took me to cancer biology for my PhD.
Okay.
Um, and I finished my PhD in 2013.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and but when I finished my PhD, I think I was 27 years old when I finished my
Mm,
PhD.
that's impressive.
When I finished, thank you. When I finished my PhD, I decided that I would get a master's in business. Um, so, so if I have 4 degrees. But I think for me, the thinking by the time I was getting to complete my PhD, I'd start thinking that I wanted to do something that brought me out into the world,
Mm-hmm.
but did more. It was I wanted to always work in science, but I wanted to do kind of merge the business world and science.
Yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
I thought to myself, because I knew where I came from as well, and I knew kind of the gaps, right, in in infrastructure, in Africa, and the lack of platforms. And I thought to myself that maybe I could build a company sometime in the future
Mm-hmm.
that will help other talented scientists excel. For some reason, I didn't think I was going to win a Nobel Prize. I didn't think I was the smartest scientist, but I thought that I could build a platform that allowed smart scientists from Africa potentially get to a place where they could win a Nobel Prize in the future.
Mm-hmm.
And so I moved to the US 3 months after my PhD to start my master's in business. And then I focused on biotech industries, right? Because I'd always wanted to do work in the life sciences. And then before I even finished the master's, I got recruited by IMS Health, which is now IQVIA today,
Yeah. Yeah.
to work as a management consultant. So I left California, which is where I was doing my master's, to Philadelphia, Plymouth meeting, where I worked for some time, and then relocated to Chicago, where I was seconded to AbbVie, the pharmaceutical company by IMS Health.
Mm-hmm.
And then I joined PricewaterhouseCoopers to do small strategy consulting in the Chicago office. Again, consulting across the US. So I was based in
Yeah.
Chicago, but across the US. And then, I'd always wanted to build a life science company in Africa. When I worked with IMS Health, I used to consult for health. I used to consult to pharmaceutical companies and advise them on how to launch products across the world. But I
Mm-hmm.
would never add Africa because we didn't.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not because I didn't want to, but the data sets we used, the proprietary data sets we used, didn't have information about Africa.
Yeah.
And so Africa was always grouped into rest of the world. And what that meant was we'll tell them, US, EU5, BRICS countries, China, Russia, Brazil, South Africa. But the rest, we don't know. So you don't have to have a real strategy for those places that we don't know. And I thought that this was untenable because my parents lived in Africa, and I want them to be able to access the best care, and so I had to move back to Africa to build a life science company that will allow us also benefit from all these global health innovations, but also allow us to contribute as an equal partner to global health innovations.
Wow, wow, wow. That's a very, very elaborate experience, and I mean, I'm still getting to know more about what you do, and I'm very, very excited about your journey and the contributions you're making to the field. But so throughout your career, were there any particular moments or any mentors or systemic gaps that kind of push you towards genomics and precision medicine specifically?
So I would say, and this may sound cliche, but I would say, my number one mentor was my dad.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, he passed away in 2023. But I don't think I would be doing this today if not for my father, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
And, my dad was of a generation as well that they were not very conversant with, the internet and computers, etc. And he had all these presentations and things to do because he was quite senior in his field. Um, And so he would tap me to do the research. So I'll go do all the research, print them out, all the documents for him. And then, he would, and then he would kind of work on it. But as I was browsing and getting all the papers that he needed, I was reading, and I was learning, the future, of biotech, of genetics.
Yeah.
So he was my mentor. But in life, sometimes it's not always the positive things that propel you.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that also pushed me forward was one of my teachers in the UK, when I was doing my masters. You know, the thing is, and let me just provide a context.
Yeah.
So, doing a bachelor's in Nigeria at the time I did it, in the field I did it in, we didn't have labs, right? So most of what we learned were theoretical, right? So we knew the theories of genetics, but we didn't really know the practical, right? Excuse me, of being able to go to a lab and do experiments. So when I got to my master's, um, we got into the practical element or period of the program, and I was behind the class at the time because I hadn't used most of these things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I remember one of the teachers called me aside one day and said, "You're not going to go very far." Um, tell me about it,
Yeah,
right?
that's surprising to hear from, a professor in the Western world.
Tell me about it. It was just me and the person. I wouldn't say if it's a male or female,
Mm-hmm.
but it was like, you're not going to go very far. You're going to get to a point and people will see that, you cannot take it far or something of that nature. And that shook me. I remember I left. I can't remember if I cried, but I know it really shook me. Um, and I think it was good to see a few years later, the same professor sent me an email saying how proud they were of me and how they even wanted me to work with their child.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, sometimes, but think about it this way. What if I listened to what that professor said?
Mm-hmm.
You know, um, I probably would have switched careers entirely. I wouldn't be doing this, right? And if I did it at that time, it would also have damaged me. And so, that also taught me in life, don't listen to what people say. You're going to get to stages in your life where there's going to be a lot of noise and people are going to talk. But you have to know what you want to believe in, and you have to hold on to that belief more than anything and just
Mm-hmm.
keep your heads down and walk, right? And
Yeah.
so even after that professor told me that, I ended up being the first in that my class to finish a PhD,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because
Yeah.
I actually did a PhD in about 2 years. I finished in
Wow.
just a little over 2 years. And so I ended up being the first in that class that she said I wasn't going to go far to finish my PhD. And I'll leave the rest out. But yeah, these are some of the things that kind of
Yeah.
propelled me as
Mm-hmm.
well.
Yeah, I mean, like you've really highlighted some key things in your narration. As you said, most times, people are looking for mentors, outside of outside of their immediate environment. But for most African students or most African professionals, I always say that your mentor, it's either your dad or your mom or your siblings, because they have the most impact on your life trajectory before you even get exposed to other external professionals. Um, so as an African founder operating in global health ecosystem. We all know how dominated it is by Western institutions. What personal or structural barriers did you have to overcome to earn, such credibility and build attraction?
I'm still overcoming.
Yeah, I know.
I don't think it ever ends. You know, I was talking to another founder, not also in the health space,
Okay.
and he's black. He's actually he lives in in North America, but he's actually from Ghana originally, and he was telling me how that his company has built a ton of value, but he can't seem to get investors to believe in him, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or what
Yeah.
the work they are doing. And, there was a situation where another founder from a different race doing almost the same thing had gone and raised a lot of money and then came to them for them to do the work for them. Do you understand? So
Yeah.
another
Yeah.
founder hadn't done the work but was able to raise the money and then came to this African founder, who has done the work but couldn't raise the money. And we had this conversation about how, when you have our skin color, for example, and I don't want to make this about that,
Yeah.
but it's a reality
Mm-hmm.
we have to deal with, that you have to be sometimes four times as good
Yeah.
to get the same level of recognition,
Mm-hmm.
right? You have to work hard. You can't afford to fail.
Yeah.
In some places, you fail upwards. When you're from certain other places, it's hard to fail upwards, right? Even when your failure is not really a failure, it's made to be such a failure, right? So, case in point would even be me and the work I was doing. By all metrics in my previous company, people in the space knew that we had accomplished what nobody else had accomplished. But was everything perfect? No. And because it was being led by a black man, it was easy to then characterize it as not as successful as what it was. But these are things that we have to deal with. And my approach to this type of things is not to lick your wounds, like not to cry about it and lick your wounds, but to pull yourself up by your bootstraps and keep working. And that's the way I live my life, right? I will continue. And I understand that these are structural barriers for the period of time we live in. If you fast forward another 100, 200 years, another group of people might have to face the same structural barriers. That's just the history of the world. And therefore, we shouldn't necessarily complain all the time. We should understand that it's our time now to face these things and see them as an opportunity to build strength and to build quality and to build resilience.
Um, Thank you so much for that enlightening response. And as African professionals, as you said, we just have to keep going. Uh, there's no excuse to give up. But I want us to transition into another segment where we talk about the importance of your work and what it means to build something like that from Africa. And some of my viewers or listeners may not have the science or the public health background. So, for those outside of the health and science community, how would you explain what bio actually does?
Okay, so maybe the first thing I'll do is let me try and explain what the importance of genetics in using layman terms. Um, so genetics are the building codes of life, right? So the way I kind of describe it is if you pick up your phone, you have certain apps on your phone. The things that make those apps work in the way they work is the codes that are used to build them. That's what genetics is to living things. It's the building blocks of lives, it's the codes that combine in different ways to make us who we are. Your genes are responsible for how you look. for how tall you are, for how big you are, or how small you are, your physical characteristics. But your genes are also responsible for why you fall ill, right? So every disease also has a genetic signature. And that's why some people, even in the case of infectious diseases, some people might be able to naturally be protected from certain diseases,
Mm-hmm.
like natural protections from HIV, for example.
Yeah.
And that's in the genes, right? Or some people can be at higher risk for certain things. So so that it's all in the genes.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what that means is it's important for us to understand ourselves, human beings, from that genetic code level, right? Because by doing that, we are able to understand why we have the diseases we have, but we are
Mm-hmm.
also able to study people who don't have certain diseases to see why they don't have certain diseases. And that helps us then understand disease biology so that we can create new drugs that work like, those natural occurrences
Yeah.
and can then result in people taking those drugs and curing disease. And but the issue we are facing here is that there is now a lot of genetic data being generated, and a lot of research is happening globally, but Africa is not included. And today, when you look at the genetic data sets available for research, Africa is contributing only about 1% of the data. What that means is it means a lot of different things. One, it means that we are missing a lot of insights. And the reason we say that is in genetics as well, what you're looking at is the variance, right? That we call them variants, the differences between us, right, human beings that are responsible for those changes that I was describing.
Mm-hmm.
And you see more variance in more genetically diverse populations, of which Africa is the most genetically diverse population, right? First of all, because there is more than 2,000 ethno-linguistic groups in Africa, which shows sort of different parentage, and so diversity. But also, Africans hold the most amount of genetic variance or genetic content, right? Because
Yeah.
modern humans began in Africa. And so every population around the world, you know, is sort of like a founder population. There's bottleneck effects where
Mm-hmm.
they migrated out of Africa. And when they were migrating out of Africa, imagine the top of a bottle, right? They took just the subset of genetic variability they had to start a new population, leaving the bulk of it in Africa.
Yeah.
So so I will then go as far as saying that the biggest opportunity in global health, as well as the biggest, how should I put this now, danger for us, public health emergency, is this whole misrepresentation, or not misrepresentation, let me not use misrepresentation, the lack of representation of
Mm-hmm.
Africa in genetic research. And it's going to lead to a huge global health crisis if we're not careful, right? First of all, in Africa, you're beginning to see that the disease makeup, the disease mix, right, is changing. Once upon a time was, oh, we have a lot of infectious diseases. I don't think it was always the case. I think it's just that we didn't have the technologies to identify the non-infectious diseases. And a lot of the funding in global health came into Africa focused on infectious diseases.
Yeah.
As the population is also growing, we're beginning to see that the numbers of cancers are quite high. And in fact, we're still underestimating the numbers of
Yeah.
cancers, the numbers of hypertension, of diabetes, of all these lifestyle type diseases, dementia, as you get older, they're increasing. and we don't know how to treat these things in Africa, in an African specific setting. Let's use cancer, for example. In the case of cancer, cancer is already a heterogeneous disease, meaning that five people can be here and have breast cancer, but of those five people, they have a different form of breast cancer.
Yeah.
One person's breast cancer is triple negative. The other person's breast cancer is HER2 positive. The other person's cancer is PR, progesterone, PR negative,
Hmm.
right? And you have all these different permutations. One is being driven by BRCA1 and 2 mutations. Um, and for all of these things I've mentioned, there's a different treatment regimen required, right? And this is for what we know now. When you now bring cancers into a very diverse population, you might even find that those permutations are a lot more.
Yeah.
And so if I was breast cancer in Ghana, I might have to start thinking about who are the different ethnic groups in Ghana? What are their genetic differences? Do we have associations where people from this part of Ghana have this type of breast cancer,
Hmm.
right? Whereas people from this other type of Ghana have this type of breast cancers, based on their ancestry. And all of that is important for public health, for precision medicine, for us to know how to take care of our population. So to kind of summarize my point, how do we now go from 1% contribution in healthcare data to being able to generate enough data ethically,
Hmm.
right, and legally to be able to, one, have enough data that we can use to treat ourselves with, but also generate data that we in Africa can then contribute in IP generation, intellectual property generation,
Yeah.
such that we can take the insights from that data and begin to make new drugs or diagnostic for ourselves as Africans, but also for the global population.
Yeah.
And that's what my job is. And over my lifetime, I'm going to do it in different ways. I might start in this company today, and tomorrow I'll move to another company. And next tomorrow, who knows, I might do it from a government seat. I don't know, right? But
Yeah.
that is going to be my goal for the next decade or two of my career.
Awesome, awesome. I mean, you've said it all. This is such an important work because, as you said, less than 3% of global genomic data originates from individuals of African descent, despite Africa being, vastly genetically diverse. So this is very important. But from your perspective, I know you may have highlighted a couple points. What structural or political choices do you think have kept African populations underrepresented in global genomic data sets?
It's very complex, right? It's a very complex issue. It's not a one size fits all or one thing in particular, but we'll talk about a few of them. um, First of all, I think that we've come from a place where our educational systems are recently beginning to embrace molecular medicine, right, and molecular biology and genetics. And that's not a hit on our educational systems in Africa because it's a global thing. This is a new field. Um, just that our universities may have caught on a bit. Some of them may have caught on a bit later, but it's moving in the right direction. The second thing we need is infrastructure. Healthcare is grossly underfunded in Africa. And the infrastructure in many African countries as it relates to healthcare is kind of rotten.
Hmm.
And we're talking about healthcare delivery, right? Much then when you now look at R&D healthcare, research and development, we also don't have leaders who understand R&D in life sciences, right? And they don't understand it because it's too complex for them, maybe. Somebody has not yet translated it into the language of economics.
Yeah.
And so that's not just the leader's fault, it's also the scientist's fault that we as scientists have to kind of try and add other things to us, right? And so you see in some countries, people get PhD MBAs together, um, or PhD or MD, JD together,
Yes.
we have to start thinking about how we are upskilling our healthcare workforce so that they don't just speak one language,
Yeah.
right, of medicine. They have to speak the language of politics, the language of economics, and by so doing, it is then easier to make a case to a government to say, if you invest X amount of money, this is your ROI over this period of time. And they can then appraise that vis-a-vis all their other projects. It's not that we don't have governments that invest in mining or other types of things that they understand. So we have to get the R&D space to a place where the leaders who have to make these decisions understand what these decisions are and what the impact is. Like I said, we also need better infrastructure across the continent. Um, we need more patient and long term capital because the infrastructure you need to be able to do molecular medicine is expensive. If you were going to get a sequencer, right, like let's say a sequencer to sequence human beings, you're looking at, mid $500,000 to over $1 million, depending on the throughput you want to use. Of course, there's lower ones of the 100, 200,000 range, but
Yeah.
that won't give you the versatility you need if you want to do, more complex diseases. Now, that's just one item, right? We just mentioned one item that could cost $1 million plus.
Yeah.
You have to think about all the other items, ancillary items in that lab. You have to think about power, right? Because we don't have good power supply. You have to think about data storage,
Yeah.
and so we need structures that help us fund these things, right?
Yeah.
Um, you can use healthcare delivery to fund some of these things, but healthcare delivery is not great as well because we don't have very good health insurance systems or healthcare payer models. And so the fees they pay are not enough to fund these things. And so, so these are it's a smorgasbord
Yeah.
of different things that we have to be working on.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you've highlighted, some of the critical points that perhaps African leaders have to look at, and all these have, you know, downstream consequences, especially for clinical research, for drug development. I know recently, most African governments, have shown commitments of trying to get pharmaceutical companies to establish some form of manufacturing units in the country. But as you've said, when the infrastructure is not there, when the data is not there, it becomes very, very difficult. So thank you for such insights. So I know you've kind of mentioned some of the challenges that we have, but in the current environment, especially across Africa, and you rightly said that leadership is everything. How would you characterize the current environment of health innovation leadership across Africa?
Um, I mean, I let me start with the positives, right? I think that the positives here is that there is a real interest from multiple parties and stakeholders to build a thriving ecosystem in Africa, a thriving life sciences and healthcare ecosystem in Africa. I think the issue, though, has always been some of the challenges around how is it funded? It's too complex. Healthcare is not as simple as, you know, and I'm not trying to take away from another industry, but in some industries, that you have, if you plant this seed at this time and you put fertilizer and you do this and do that, you could, you know, end up with crop, right?
Yeah,
It's almost like a straightforward transaction. Yes, there are things that could go wrong, but it's kind of a straightforward transaction. Fintech is relatively also kind of like a straightforward transaction. The infrastructure is already built. If you can build this solution, you provide a service, somebody will use this to make their lives easier. Healthcare is more complex,
Mm-hmm.
right? It has a lot of stakeholders. And I think that we also in Africa, we have this thing where we don't trust each other very much. Um, See, you laughed. So,
Yeah, that's
so yeah,
true.
I guess that's true. We don't trust each other very much. We also want to be the only or the first. We don't see. We don't necessarily have. I don't know if it's a cultural thing, but there is this lack of ecosystem mindset, collaborative mindset, if you would. And I'm the one saying it, right? And I've been guilty of it, right? So I'm not pointing fingers at anybody. And if I'm pointing fingers, I'm pointing at myself first before anybody else. And I think that on the talent side, we're beginning to see talent. When I first started 54 Gene, we wanted to have African data scientists in Africa doing the
Mm-hmm.
work. We put out, this was like 2020, right? We put out a job ad. That job ad was there for like 6 months plus, and we couldn't find, right, to what we're looking for.
Yeah.
And so we had to start looking outside of Africa for that talent. But the beautiful thing that I think happened was because of all that was happening around 54 Gene, it inspired lots of people to say, we want to go to school and study data science and get
Yes.
bioinformatics
Mm-hmm.
and so now we have more of talent, and even Africans who are abroad are wanting to come back, to help contribute. So I do think that the talent is there. um I think that what we now have to learn how to do is how to bring all the talent is there. We need to bring in the right financial partners, because you
Yeah.
could also have the wrong financial partners. Because we are trying to build up an ecosystem, it's not going to take 4 years or 5 years, right?
Yeah.
The typical VC kind of mindset, in terms of length of duration of their funds, it's about 4 or 5 years, after which they want to sell, right? Private equity might be interested in 2 to 3 years, right? And they want to sell. You can't really build a thriving ecosystem with all the challenges that entails in Africa in those timelines. You need a longer breadth of time. You need 10 years, 20 years. And the truth is, we will not be that much different from other countries or geographies that have done this. China did it, right? Japan did it for cars. If you when I was in business school, we're studying how the Japanese companies decided that they were going to compete with the American car companies. And at the time, the Japanese companies had, I think it was motorcycles, Kawasaki, Suzuki,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
and they decided that they were going to compete in cars, but that it was going to take them 20 years. And so they didn't try to catch up with the US in 5 years. They had to put in investment and leave it for 20 years for it to
Yeah.
develop into what it would develop into. And now, when you look around the world, you have more Japanese cars than American cars, you know? And if you look in China, in the life science space, the Chinese, clinical research industry is almost the same size now as the US is.
Yeah.
Again, it's taken them about 20 years to get there. I think for us in Africa, we have to have that long timeline. And we need funders who can come in with that long timeline. Now, the types of funders that would do that will be your typical government, right, or
Yeah.
major foundations.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we need in the healthcare space. Particularly the life science, the R&D space. That's the kind of funding we need. Um, and yeah, I think that's what we need.
Yeah. That's. I mean, that is very true. That is very true.
Yeah.
Um, and I mean, I can't end on this note without us talking about uh, data protection, because I think that is one of the issues that comes up a lot across Africa. Anytime you're talking about research and development or collecting data sets. So my question is, what's your approach or your stance on how perhaps African countries should govern genomic data and intellectual property?
Okay, so this is going to be a nuanced response,
Mm-hmm.
right? And as with most complex things, it's more nuanced than a one answer fits all. Um, First of all, I believe strongly in data sovereignty of African samples and data for genomics research. My personal belief is that the samples and data from African populations should be treated as a natural resource in the same way you would treat your gold reserves or your diamond reserves or your oil reserves. You should understand that the data of your population and your people is actually rich and holds within it keys that can improve healthcare in your country, but could also unlock uh, advances and improvements globally. And so you want to be able to have sovereignty there. So I agree with that. Now, I also don't think that because we are talking about data sovereignty, that means you have to hog these resources. You have to understand that you need you need to be able to share that data with um, well-meaning, value-aligned partners who can generate intellectual property or
Yeah.
work with you to generate intellectual property on the data, or who can pay you a fee for using your data to generate intellectual property, right? These are all different models that can be
Yeah.
used. And so we have to be able to do that. We also then have to be able to understand that if you really want to generate intellectual property, you have to invest in the capabilities to generate intellectual property, which are different from the data itself, right? The data does not give you intellectual property. It gives you, I mean, it gives you intellectual property, but not in a way that is very defensible. Your defense is your ability to take the insights from the data and create new drugs that you can patent or new diagnostics or tools or whatever that you can patent.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in order to do that, there is an investment needed. You need to start thinking as a country, for example, how much are we putting towards R&D in our country? How much of our budget is going towards R&D, research and development,
Yeah.
right? Um, we are competing with a global, field full of governments that are investing billions and billions and billions yearly in R&D. So if we want to be able to capture the value, we have to also invest. If you're not the one investing, somebody else is going to come from somewhere and invest in a company in your country. And yes, the company might be your country, but that means that somebody else is also sharing that IP, which is okay. But you have to understand that there is a role for you to play as a government. But I think one of the things I want to just leave here was something I observed in Abu Dhabi. I was somewhere, and the government there is looking to be the leader in artificial intelligence in healthcare and life sciences. And they understand that this means that they may break certain things, they may not get it perfect initially, but they are putting everything, they have the right principles in place.
Mm-hmm.
And they're putting the processes and structures to be able to catch, certain things when it goes awry. But you can't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs, right? Actually, you have to break all the eggs to make an omelet. But I think that
Yeah.
we have this risk aversion as well
Yeah.
that is kind of cultural, and we have to get. I mean, and I also won't blame anybody, from where we come from who has that, because some of it too is due to structural, and historical biases and issues that have happened. So we have to understand who we are. We have to understand where we've come from. Those are all right to do, but we also have to decide, not understand, but decide where we want to go, right? And I think that's the point I hope we are now, where and not all African countries will do this, but all it may take is one or two to start,
Yeah.
and the rest will follow because they'll see the results in that one or two.
That's very insightful, and I mean you've highlighted very essential uh, aspects. So hopefully, I mean we will see more investment from our governments. More contribution towards health and R&D in general, because at this pace it's going to take a very long time. All right. So, I mean, it's been really insightful to hear all the amazing things. But there are also some people who are here for the fun. So let's look at beyond the lab, beyond the genomics. What your life actually looks like. Um, so when you're not like at work, or when you're not leading genomics or advocating for data equity, how do you typically unwind? Like any hobbies that you enjoy?
My life is boring. um, I mean, I do like to spend time. My best times are when, like, I'm with my family, my kids. Um, that is the best time I have. But outside of that, I like to play basketball.
Uh-huh. Okay.
Um, I I like to read a few good books, even though these days it's hard because my brain, by the time I'm done for the day, my brain is hot, and I just want to, I wanted to kind of decompress.
Yeah.
I do like good TV shows. Intelligent TV shows that just,
Eh, eh,
yeah,
do you have any
like music.
favorite, like any favorite TV show that you can watch again? Um,
Oh, yes, there's some that I find myself. I mean, when there's a good TV show, I end up watching it a few times. Um, not back to back, but over time.
yeah.
Obviously, Game of Thrones is one I like a lot. Succession was very good. I've watched Succession like two or three times. I've watched Game of
Oh.
Thrones like four times.
Oh wow.
Um, and I still don't remember everything in Game of Thrones. It's
Wow.
but yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
I like Yellowstone. So like Yellowstone is this show in the US set in Montana. Um and then Paramount is behind it, and then from Yellowstone there's a whole Yellowstone universe, and then there's now a number of shows from the US West,
Mm-hmm.
that kind of shot in Wyoming or Texas. And I spent a good chunk of last year in Fort Worth, Texas, where some of these shows were shot. So I really, I feel like in another life I would have been a cowboy.
Oh,
um,
okay, that's
so
interesting to know. Yeah,
yeah, so
but
yeah,
have you watched Breaking Bad?
yes, I've watched Breaking Bad. I've watched it only once. I've
Okay.
watched it and
Yeah,
enjoyed. I
yeah.
enjoyed it. I did enjoy it. Yeah.
That's one of my all-time favorites as well. But apart from uh, movies or shows, do you have um, any sports like any? What's your favorite sport? I'm sure most likely it's
So I'd
gonna be
say
soccer
I
or maybe
played
not.
basketball.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good way for me to get some cardio in. I do like basketball.
Okay,
It's also a game that you can kind of just play by yourself, if you wanted to.
that's
So,
true.
I like basketball. I do like to watch basketball. Right now, I can't tell you who my, I mean, I for the longest time, and nobody should judge me. For the longest time, I was a Lakers fan.
Okay.
And I think I was a Lakers fan for most of, from Kobe Bryant, Shaq to post Kobe Bryant.
Yeah.
Now I'm more of a Dallas Mavericks fan.
Mm.
I just like I like what that team stands for. I like Irving a lot. Um, yeah, so I watch basketball. Uh, on the football side or soccer for our US friends, I'm a Manchester United fan.
Oh, it's too
Um,
late.
yeah, I've stayed with them, all through the bad times. I'm still a Man U fan.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm changing there. But yeah, I watch other sports, but those are
That's
the two I
yeah.
watch.
But in terms of soccer, I mean, who is your all-time? Or I mean, if you have to pick one person to play in your team, are you gonna pick Ronaldo or Messi?
I'll pick David Beckham. I'm not going to fall into that trap. But if I was to
Anyway,
pick between, I would pick.
uh-huh.
I'll pick Ronaldo.
You pick Ronaldo. Oh, okay. We
He
kind of
was a
agree
man.
on that.
He was a United, right? He was a Man U fan,
Yes, yes,
but
yes.
so he was a Man U player. But outside of being a Man U player, I think I like Ron. What he. I mean, I'm not taking anything away from Messi.
From
Messi
Messi.
is very talented, but I think Ronaldo is more. He feels more like a hustler. Like he's achieved his success by working hard,
A lot of
running,
hard work. Yeah.
a lot of hard work, and I think that resonates with me.
Yeah, that's true. Um, and just to test the diplomatic instincts, I know like you've been in Ghana. How many times have you been in Ghana?
You don't tell me you're bringing up jollof rice. Don't tell me you're bringing up jollof rice.
you know
Um,
where you know where this is going.
I've
So
been,
I mean,
yeah,
if you have to pick, uh, Ghana jollof or Niger jollof?
Senegal jollof. You see,
Okay, so
I
so
only
you
had
see
Senegal jollof.
that yeah, this answer for our
Yeah.
viewers, this answer only shows that you think Ghana jollof is slightly better. So
Oh,
that's
really?
okay.
It's like, I'm going to be very, very, very honest with you. I am yet to eat the Ghana jollof that makes that conversation even worthwhile. Do you understand? Like when people say Ghana jollof, Nigerian jollof, I've been to Ghana a few times. In fact, once I have a Ghanaian friend. I told her and her husband, I'm like, I want to eat this Ghana jollof. So we go somewhere and we get the jollof, and I'm like, "Is this it?" And she's like, "Oh no, this is not the good one." I'm like, "Come on." So,
that's
but
that's definitely not a
what
good one.
what I will give you is wache.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the watch is really, yeah, the
Now
watch is good.
wache, that's what you guys should own. right?
No,
Not
we
the
just want something to claim superiority over Nigeria, and
and people.
the only thing we've claimed so far is stable electricity, constant
Oh
light.
wow,
That's the only thing we've claimed. But anyway,
that's fine. That's fine. We'll give you that. Actually, I think that I actually enjoy staying in Ghana, right? I think, but then it's easy. You're just 20 million people. So you see, it's like
yeah.
you're less than the size of Lagos, and you're competing with this giant.
Oh,
You know, of course, it's going
but
to be complicated for us
we,
and how we manage things. But it's easy
yeah.
to lead 20 million people
But you
over two
see
weeks.
that if we bring the argument, then we'll say as for China, they will never have light in their life, but they have light. So
Oh,
it's not really about the numbers. It's also about something else.
I'm just saying
Anyway,
generally, not just lights,
uh
not
huh.
just lights,
Anyway,
but no,
yeah, I understand.
I really like Ghana. I was supposed to actually do my bachelor's in Ghana at
Oh,
Legon,
okay.
but I did. Yeah, so
I see.
I do like Ghana.
Yeah.
You're good younger brothers, you know.
Yeah, I mean, as for Ghana
We
and
love
Nigeria,
that.
a lot of people see me and they're like, "Are you from Nigeria?" Sometimes I just say yes. Sometimes I just,
You know, people think
reveal
I'm
this.
Ghanaian.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
You look really Ghanaian. Anyway, so yeah, Dr. Bessie, thank you so much for sharing your work and your perspective and all the clarity that you've shared with us today. Your efforts are reshaping African science and also challenging global norms about who leads, who benefits, and who counts as innovation. So for everyone listening, the future of health must be inclusive by design, not by afterthought. And people like Dr. Abasi are showing us exactly what the future or how the future gets built. But Dr. Abasi, before we leave you, I know there are a lot of young professionals on my platform, young scientists. Some of them are aspiring founders like you or policymakers urging for something ambitious. What's the one principle or mindset that you believe they must hold on to, especially when the system isn't really built for them?
So there's two things I'll say. I'll leave them with. One is the young must get old one day, right? So I'm about to turn 40. Luckily, I started a bit early.
Mm-hmm.
I still have some time ahead, but we need a cycle. You know, we need people who can come in into this space because um, we need to be able to build it sustainably and for long term. So if you're out there and you think you're one of those people, please come in. It's for all our benefits that we all have to try in our different ways to build this ecosystem. The other thing I would say is this saying I think has been attributed to Warren Buffett, and other people have attributed it to Bill Gates. It's that we overestimate what we can accomplish in 1 year, but we underestimate what we can accomplish in 10 years. And as a young man, when I first started my first company, I was very much in that shoe about overestimating what I can accomplish in 1 year, right, in a short
Mm-hmm.
term, and trying to get it all bang, 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 bang. But that's the prerogative of a young man.
Yeah.
As you start getting older, you start understanding the benefit of and pace and pacing and consistency, right? That if you continue, yes, there will be time that the world will praise you, and sometimes we expect only good in a journey, but there is no journey that is worthwhile that is only good, right? Ralph Waldo Emerson has this saying that to be great is to be persecuted, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you can't be great without persecution. And he says, Everyone who was great, who was ever great, was persecuted. Plato, Jesus, he lists a few people. And so we need to kind of be able to remind ourselves of what the truth is, leave whatever social media looks like, because it's not real,
Yeah.
and understand we have to focus on true north, put our heads down, be consistent. And if you continue, it's the principle of compound interest, right? Compound interest that happens in money happens in life.
Yeah.
If you continue, you will find yourself compounding over time and your impact compounding. And if all of us, a group of us, work in that way, there's nothing impossible for us as African scientists.
That's very true. Thank you so much for those last words. It really shows how consistency can translate into measurable outcomes. So thank you so much for your time. It's been an exciting encounter. Um, so until next time, this is Dr. Banda Khalifa, and you've been listening to Global Health Uncensored. Stay bold, stay grounded, and keep asking the hard questions. Dr. Abasi, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Dr. Banda.